Kabbalah. Kabbalah is a very in the world of symbolism, it's prime real estate, and people want to own that word. So when if we say, well, actually, all those years what you thought was Kabbalah was really Judaism, the traditional esoteric occult community, it kind of rubs their fur in the wrong direction. Some fortune tellers don't like it because it's like they really want to see the tarot as mysterious. And so when you do damage to the mystery of the tarot, that's kind of like a little bit of a letdown. And interesting, the people I'm most disappointed with, the people that I wrestle with a lot, that are making progress, the traditional Jewish community, is that a lot of people don't want to hear this, or it's hard for them to hear this because tarot has such a negative reputation in the Jewish world. Tarot is assumed it's associated with the occult, with the satanic, with fortune telling, all these things that are explicitly forbidden. I mean, they associate with idol worship, avodah zarah. So when you say tarot, they're like, that is forbidden in Judaism. That's the end of the conversation. So it takes a while to say, well, actually, these cards were made 100 years before they were used for fortune telling. Or actually, let me tell you, it's a very hard. There's a lot of emotional resistance to the topic.
Yeah.
So it's been a funny, humorous process of trying to sell. I'm basically in the process of having to sell this theory and this thesis.
Well, yeah, hopefully this helps get the word out there more. There's definitely some publishers who I think should be interested in your book, and I think this study deserves a fine treatment by a publisher. So given the quality of stuff out there, yeah, let's make this happen. I'm putting my will behind it for sure. It's very interesting. You do have a book available now, but
I wrote a very slim publication with a reprint of the Noblesse 22 cards, and what I'm basically, it's a very shorthand, concise summary of the Judaica hidden in the cards.
Beautiful.
I do want to do a lot.
What's it called?
It's called the Torah and the Tarot.
The Torah and the Tarot.
The Torah and the Tarot, and you can if you Google it, and you can. I have a website. I sell it really cheap. I mean, I'm not into this for the money at all. I've spent a lot of money on just like on books, and I printed it myself, and I commissioned an artist to redo the cards. So I'm selling it as cheaply as I can. I basically want to just I'm sure, and pretty much almost I share a lot of this content, almost all of it for free on Instagram. I'm being very open with people.
Yeah, no, wonderful. So I look forward to getting that, reading it myself, and yeah, let's hope that a bigger book comes along, and I'm sure it will. This is too interesting. I understand what you're saying though about upsetting a lot of the different circles of people out there. I do that myself, just by, I guess, being nitpicky about, you can fit into one world except for this fact, and this world except for this fact, and then you end up with a very small intersection of the people that are into your thing. But at least those people are, they're the people who are really into what you're into, so that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I am making a lot of progress. Like, I'm actually working with the Jewish Arts Council of Boston and an artist, Jonathan Prince. We're designing what's going to be an augmented reality exhibit so it'll be a museum exhibit where the cards are blown up and you put your phone up, and then the animation will move to show you the hidden Judaica in the card. So that's an exhibit we're working on, but that may take years. We'll see how it's going.
Did you have some images you want to present and go through?
Yeah. I'll give you. Let me share. Okay, 1 second.
This has been I can't tell you how much I love this. Thank you for spending time with me.
My pleasure. No, yeah, I'm so happy. I'm really happy for every opportunity to share this story. Are you able to see? I'm actually. Do you see it? Okay.
Yes, I read you here.
So this has become more than a hobby. It's kind of a bit of an obsession for me, because I feel a lot of obligation to the artists of 1650. Because I mean, this is the punchline for me in a lot of ways, is that tarot. I really knew very little about tarot a few years ago, and I've really come to appreciate tarot in general as a very beautiful and unique genre of visual art. But for the Jean Noble Tarot de Marseille in particular is a really unrecognized masterpiece of spiritual art. That when you see how much content these people worked and labored to conceal in these cards, it's basically a Rosetta Stone to a lost period of history. And that's my really big hope, is for people to start recognizing what's going on in this particular deck of cards. Currently, it's in the French National Archives. It's categorized as under the category of playing cards. I think it's a terrible disservice to this work of art. And that's my big hope, is to grab the attention of a few academics to get them started on really researching a much bigger story here. And I think there's so much more here than that I've been able to unlock. I think I'm just kind of pointing in the direction. Okay, but back to so what I'm showing here is I'm basically showing the evolution of one particular card of tarot, and I call this tarot's game of telephone. It's like the game of broken telephone, where people whisper in each other's ears. And so,
I actually just used that as an example with a client the other day, or a friend the other day. Ironically, continue. Sorry.
What's fine? Did you have more? Okay, so this is the game. So the first card is around 1500, probably a couple of days. This is the Visconti deck. This is the deck that you showed earlier. So this is the one all the way on the right side of the screen. I guess I'm doing this in Hebrew, right to left. And it's this beautiful deck. The batch size was 1, which was like one fine artist made some really truly beautiful deck of cards. And then the next card I'm showing you is from 1760. This is from the Convert deck. It's made like 250 years later. But now this deck is printed with a wooden block. So they're mass producing these decks. It's like a business. And there was actually a guild of tarot card makers in France. It was a business, just like it's a business today. It was a business back then. People were playing cards. They were gambling. They were making them in bulk. The next card is from the Oswald Wirth deck, and this was made in 1889. And Oswald Wirth was he was a kind of an eccentric Swiss esoteric and artist, and he was very big into occult theories, esoteric theories. And he was kind of around the time of Eliphas Levi with the rise of the occult. And you can see that when he made his version of the magician, he's inserting the Hebrew letter Aleph. This is when people started Eliphas Levi really popularized this idea of associating the 22 trump cards with Hebrew letters, and he thought this was Kabbalah. This version of Kabbalah they were very explicit that it was Kabbalah without Judaism, Kabbalah that has been purged of Jews. And the reason why they had a purge of Judaism is that Eliphas Levi and others, they were presenting themselves as the true authorities about Kabbalah. I think they were, in my mind, when I read their books, I mean, they were kind of performance artists. I don't know to what extent they took themselves seriously. I think they were artists, but they were also esoteric theorists. I think they were. I don't know to what extent they were showmen or to what extent they were taking themselves entirely seriously. For me, it's not so clear. And then in 1909, that's the deck. That's the Pamela Coleman Smith. That's the deck that everyone recognizes, right? When people close their eyes, they imagine tarot. That's the deck they saw. But you can see there is this game of telephone that's playing out over centuries, over 4 different centuries. However, this second deck, this card from 1760, this is the Tarot de Marseille, and the Tarot de Marseille was very popular in France. It was over centuries. People made numerous versions of the Tarot de Marseille, and one of the misnomers, kind of one of the cognitive errors in the world of tarot, is that tarot is a singular noun. We talk about the tarot. But the truth is that different artists made different cards for different purposes and different agendas. All right, so they're like, these are all the magician, but there's a different story behind each one of these. The one on the right was made by a wealthy family as a playing card. The second card was probably a middle class family in France, also for playing cards. The third card is now someone who's using the cards for esoterica. And the fourth card is now we're into full-blown fortune telling and divination, right? There's been an evolution of this tool. But now we're going to do a deep dive. I'm going to show you.
Just if I can, of course, if Roger Parasus's thesis is correct, and Pamela Coleman Smith and A.E. Waite used the 1909 deck to embed the Welsh Grail story, and you can see it's very telling that the Golden Dawn magical tools are not what Smith used for the Magician card, which is what you would think they would use. And the cards we use in our initiations are very different than the Coleman Smith. So she would have been initiated with a whole different set of cards. But when it came to telling the story, she puts the 4 Irish weapons of the provinces of the kingdom, so traditionally meant to be the sword, the spear, the cauldron, and the stone, and she did something sort of in between the two. So that's an interesting thesis that has yet to be really fully explored since the 80s. So anyway, just wanted to so that, because that would be tied the Magician card back into the idea of concealing a hidden narrative,
right? And it's I mean, that's beautiful. I mean, I love I'm a man of books. I read a lot of books. And one thing I learned from tarot, that I really learned from tarot, is that to what extent I live in a world of words. How I live in a reality comprised of words. And wrestling with these pictures, I really learned to what extent words can be very limiting, because they're so precise, they're so exact. And that when you delve into images, suddenly your mind is really liberated to see new currents of symbolism that you would really never get just from literal interpretation. So yeah, it's beautiful that there's stories embedded within stories that connect with stories in ways that words could never do. So what I'm showing you here. This is the oldest version of the Tarot de Marseille known. This is the Jean Noblet Tarot de Marseille from 1650. This is the first time that a magician is holding up a wand. That the oldest time, and
okay,
and it's very different. And the first thing you may notice is that the first time a magician is holding up a wand, it's actually not a wand at all. It's actually a penis.
That's what I was gonna say. I just didn't know if I should bite my tongue. I'm like, it kind of looks like a Fernanda.
It's a penis. Actually, and if you look closely, it's explicitly a circumcised penis.
That is very clear.
It's very clear, and and it's like kind of covered with this like red paint, which and people have known about this penis for a while, but people
That's the best line anyone's ever said on this podcast. People have known about this penis.
People say, oh, it's really funny. They say Noblet was a kinky guy. He was a weird guy because his magician is waving a penis, and it's a joke. People think it's a joke. They think it's funny, or they think he's like doing a fuck you or something. But people interpret it as a joke. However, for me, someone from a traditional Jewish background, when I see this figure holding up a circumcised penis, it means something incredibly different to me. Because a circumcised penis is in Hebrew, it's the Brit Milah. It's literally the symbol of the covenant. It's loaded with tremendous religious meaning. And here, what I'm showing you are images of traditional circumcision kits.
Oh, wow. Look at that. Wow. That because this whole time I wanted to be like, so what's going on with the different objects on the table? And now you have explained, yes, this is amazing.
So when you do a traditional circumcision, there's a prayer book. When you cut off the foreskin, there is a drop of blood. You have a very sharp knife. There's a cup of sand. So when you cut off the foreskin, you put it in a cup of sand. You also have a cup of wine because you give the baby some wine to drink. You also have a cup of spices because you have the child. Everyone's supposed to smell the spices before. There's a very sensory experience to this. There's a triangular object that's used. It's called a magen or shield. So what you do is you have this magen, and you pull the foreskin through so that when you cut, the metal shield protects the inner organ of the penis. Why are there dice? Well, if you count the spots on top of the dice, there's 8 spots. A circumcision is always conducted on the 8th day of life. And if you count the total number of spots, there's 15. And 15 is a gematria code, a Hebrew numeric code for the letters Yud Hey, which are the first 2 letters of God. And there's actually a lot of gematria code. In his other hand, he's holding a coin. There's a Jewish tradition called Pidyot Ben, which is the redemption of the son. So when you give birth to a son, you're supposed to pay the high priest a coin. It's a tradition. And so overall, this card is it's basically a secret depiction of the ritual of circumcision. The first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Aleph. And if you can see, his arms are held like those of the letter Aleph. And this is the pattern you'll see. Like if you go through all 22 cards, you're going to see this pattern over and over again, which is the Hebrew letters are half present, half concealed. They're present enough so that if you know Hebrew well and you see this, you'll say that guy is posing like an Aleph. But if you don't know Hebrew well, you'd never pick up on it. And for me, it's like, oh yeah, that's Aleph. Why is it Aleph? Because for me, Aleph is the first letter in Avraham, who was the first patriarch who underwent circumcision. At a traditional circumcision, the rabbi wears tefillin, so we tie leather straps to our left arm, and that's there's a commandment which says you should bind the commandments of the Torah to your arm and place them as a sign between your eyes. During a circumcision, you wear tefillin, and you can see that in his left hand, the hand is kind of mimicking the posture of there are 3 Hebrew letters in one's hand. You tie the knots to form the letters of Shin, Dalet, and Yud, which is Shaddai, a name for God. And you can see that there's a Shin, Dalet, and Yud interposed on each other. And actually, there's a very famous quote from Sefer Yetzirah. Some people say the oldest text of the Kabbalah, where it describes the Sefer Yetzirah kind of describes Abraham as kind of a magician, someone who has these kind of Abraham is described as having the ability to make souls. And there's this very specific quote where it talks about when God came to him and made a covenant with him, and he made a covenant between the 10 fingers of his hands, that is the covenant of the tongue, and between the 10 toes of his feet, that is the covenant of circumcision, and he bound the 22 letters of Torah to his tongue. And so I think the reason they placed this is kind of and you see this repeatedly throughout the cards, where the artists are kind of making these very explicit visual depictions of these classic lines of Kabbalah. And interesting, so the Kabbalists, if you ask the Kabbalists why there are 22 Hebrew letters, and why there are 22 cards of tarot, so the idea is that there's a line from Psalms which says that I know the Lord God when I see the stars of the sky, I see the work of his fingers. So they know that God has 10 fingers. So the idea is that there's the covenant of the tongue is the Torah itself, which a lot of it has to do with words. So the covenant of the tongue is your mouth. So you have 10 fingers in your tongue, and then there's your 10 toes and your genitalia. So altogether, someone has 22 digits. So they say the Lord God created the world with 22 digits, and we're a reflection of God. We're made in his image. So with our 22 digits, we can interact with his creation. And likewise, they're the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, or another reflection of those same 22. So that 22 is seen as our 22 digits and the 22 letters are the basic building blocks of the creation.
Fascinating. This is amazing.
And there's all this code, and there's a lot of gematria code. So like he has 12 stripes on his chest. There are 12 stripes on the hangman. There's 12 in the cards over and over. You'll see these 12 stripes. These are for the 12 tribes of Israel.
Yeah.
And all this gematria, like if you go to later versions of the Tarot de Marseille, all of this is immediately lost. And there's no other deck of tarot that has the same type of obsessive attention to detail, where someone really that's why I believe this was made by a group of artists who labored for a long time, because they worked so hard to make every little, square of real estate embedded with value and meaning. So that's why I keep telling people this one's different. This is a really unique masterpiece. It's a real artifact of a really unique moment in history.
What do you think Valentin Tomberg would say if he could have seen your research?
It's such a great question. I don't know because I don't know. You probably know better than me. I don't know.
I mean, I think he would have been thrilled, maybe a little upset as he was a Roman Catholic convert.
Right.
But from reading his meditations, no matter how much of a convert he was, even at that time and up until his death, I'm pretty sure, he was still an anthroposophist and an esotericist first. Like, he spends a lot of time talking about the inner teachings versus the outer. So I think he would have just taken it in stride. And so one of the things the Golden Dawn, like if you look at the Rigardi Wang deck, which is a later Golden Dawn deck, of course, from the 20th century, you can count things. Anything that can be counted adds up to like 22 or 12 or 10 or the main mystical numbers. So it's nice to see that wasn't something that was artificially superimposed onto the tarot by Victorian and 20th century occultists who wanted to co-opt a game for their spirituality and magic.
Right. No, that, I mean, that what
Rather,
I read
now, it looks like they were resuscitating lost Jewish mystery tradition.
Right. Yeah. When I read a lot of old Kabbalah in Hebrew. I enjoy reading in Hebrew because it's so hard. I just enjoy how hard it is, how cryptic it is. But these guys were obsessed with, like, they would take a verse of Torah, they would ascribe numeric values to every letter and every word, and I guess they had it's like an OCD disorder. They would try to find, and they really saw like a lot. They thought they kind of looked at this as like the particle physics of their time. They really thought that this was the hidden architecture of the cosmos, and they took it quite seriously. And so no, the later occult esotericists, they did not make that up out of a vacuum. That was inspired by an older tradition.
It's so interesting to consider more what you said, that Elif Alevi might have had some friends who pointed some things out to him, and he's like, well, I can't present this as a Jewish thing, obviously.
That's what that's what puzzles me, is that when I first read Eliphas Levi, I was like, oh, he's stealing our stuff. It's appropriation. But
of
then,
course,
but
it
now
is.
that
We stole Jesus from you.
but yeah. So I mean, but let's be fair. The truth is, everything's appropriated from everything, right? Nothing's original.
You see that.
If we had some, I'm a Jew, but I'm sure there's some ancient Egyptian. If he showed up, he'd be like, Stav, you stole that whole Torah. It's all Egyptian. You took everything from him. Everything is stolen from somebody else. It's all stolen. Yeah.
Yes,
so
agreed.
So nothing, it's kind of silly. The appropriation game is a little silly, but with the cult, but I'm very torn because, like, I don't know if I should look at Eliphas Levi as a thief, or it's very possible that was
maybe a kind of savior in a weird way.
Right. Maybe he just wasn't allowed to say Jewish. Maybe he would be like, if I said this was Jewish, it would blow up in my face. Like, just that would be the end of it. I mean, we'll never know. We don't know, because it was, Judaism itself was a taboo back then. So it's impossible. It's you can't, basically, in short, it's very challenging to take our contemporary moral lenses and aim it retroactively. It's not necessarily constructive, in short.
It is a major hermeneutic problem, as we say, right?
Yeah.
Which is why you need to have a fine publisher help support you in putting out a fine, well-bound, beautiful book, because this is too cool for school, man.
Oh, you want to do another card?
Yeah, yes, please.
All right, we're gonna do.
Please, can I have some more?
All right, we're gonna do the death card. Everyone loves the death card.
This is a fun morning. I usually try to avoid podcasting in the morning because of all the noise outside, but I'm very glad we
happy I could be entertaining. All right.
Death card.
That's the death
Rock
card.
and roll.
Everybody loves the death card. So on my Instagram account, when I've seen a correlation between likes and subject matter. So some cards get more likes than others. The second most popular card that people love, they love it, is the Star, because it has a naked lady on it. People love seeing a naked lady. But the most popular card by far is the death card. I don't know why people love posts about the death card. I don't know what that says about who we are, but they love the death card. All right.
I remember once I had the death card in a tarot reading I was doing for someone I met on the bus when I was 12. This is how I made money after I had my hair got too long to babysit anymore. That might not make sense to people these days, but back in 93, trust me, that was a real
that was a big
problem.
deal.
Yeah, now that would be like racist or something. So I started doing tarot readings, and I pulled the death card in his reading, and he got very upset. He's like, no, I don't want to die. I'm like, no, this is a good card. It's a card of transformation. He's like, can you just tell me I'm going to live a long time and be rich? I'm like, you're going to live a long time and be rich? He's like, thank you. And that was it.
There you go. He got his money's worth. He got his worth.
Hey, and I got my $1 a minute. So
I have a very good friend who's a longtime tarot reader, and he often talks about he kind of got burnt out of the profession because he's like he sees himself as like as a very thoughtful, deep, poetical inhabitant of the world of symbol, but everyone kept wanting to ask them about, hey, is my girlfriend going to come back to me? They people kept asking people. He said for years people were just asking the same question over and over and over again. And so, so somebody could write a funny movie about that one day, about the frustrated tarot reader who's just exhausted by people's simple questions that come up over and over again. So, all right. So the death card. So I'm showing you 3 versions, and this is interesting because in the Raider White Smith deck, they really abandoned the older. The older version had a skeleton, but here they added a lot more. They went in a very different direction. But we're going to focus on. So first off, if you're a student of Hebrew, you would see that there's a letter tzaddik. It's really front and center. And also one of the things that's strange about this card is that the death figure is smiling. He's happy, which people find very enigmatic about this card in particular. So the letter tzaddik has a lot of unique meaning in Judaism. So the letter tzaddik, the name tzaddik, is actually a homonym for the word tzaddik, which means righteous. And someone who's righteous literally means they're correct. What does it mean they're correct? It means that they have the right balance of tzedek, which is justice, and tzedakah, which is charity. And this is kind of like traditional Judaism. And there's in Judaism, there's 13 articles of faith. This is from the Rambam in like the 13th century, 12th century. I'm sorry. And the Rambam, the one of the 13th article of faith, and Rambam said this is the most important article of faith at all, is that at the end of time, the righteous will be resurrected from the dead. And it's specifically, it's not everyone who gets, it's the righteous, the tzaddikim, who rise from the dead. And this whole belief of the resurrection of the dead, it's from Ezekiel's vision of the dry bones. And this is a very famous portion of the Bible from Ezekiel 37, in which God grabs Ezekiel by the tuft of hair on top of his head. He brings him to this valley. And Ezekiel sees all this valley of all these dry old bones. And the Lord God tells them that I have the ability I'm showing you that the righteous one day will come back alive. And he says, I will cause breath to enter you and shall live again. And then as he sees this, all the bones come together and they start to grow flesh again. They become alive again. And this is the origin of the 13th article of faith and belief in the resurrection of the dead in the world to come. And here's like an artist depiction. And famously, the rabbis believe that your backbone was called, in Judaism, it's called a luz bone, and it was believed that from specifically the luz bone was the container of your eternal soul. Now, why Luz? Luz is an old name for Jerusalem. So the idea was that There's the belief that in the world to come, the entire world will be reborn from Jerusalem, from the luz of the world, and likewise a human being will be reborn again from our spinal column. And this is why Orthodox Jews, by the way, they're very against cremation, because they think it'll be harder for us to be resurrected from our luz bones. Now, there is a specific line in Ezekiel 8:3, which is V'yishlach tavnit yad v'kachni b'tzitzit roshi. So God took his hand and grabbed me by the tassel of my ear. And the word is tzitzit, and tzitzit is spelled with a tzadich. Tzitzit also means tassel. It's also the word for the tassels on a prayer shawl. And tzitzit is also the word for the 4 strings that we wear. So Orthodox Jews, they wear 4 strings on the corners of their shirt, again, as a constant reminder of the commandments of the Torah. So he has a tzitzit tassel on his hair, which is also the tzitzit that Ezekiel was grabbed by. And this figure is actually his limbs are actually 4 strings of tzitzit knot. You can see these little kind of anklets or niklets. They're mimicking the knots on traditional tzitzit. So this figure is actually an anthropomorphic disguised image of tzitzit, which are spelt with tzadik. And so you see, and so this is the pattern in the cards where they depict a story from the Tanakh, from the Hebrew Bible, but also they cram in as many Judaic ritual objects as possible. And this one, it's tzitzit. It's now you may say, and so people say to me, they're like, well, that's cute. You found 2 ritual objects. That's cute. And so I would say, yeah, that's totally legit. But for you to really take my theory seriously, I'd have to show you a pattern. I'd have to show you numerous ritual objects. So here's the hermit. And this is the Rader White-Smith deck. This is the hermit from 1650. So this hermit is a copy of a copy of a copy. Like 300 years passed between 300 years, and we don't know how many scores of different decks went. The game of telephone was very long. One of the weird things to me is that there's a Star of David here. I don't know why they did that, but so the 9th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Tet. And Tet is the first word in Talit, which is a prayer shawl. And if you notice, the hermit is actually wearing a prayer shawl. You can see that so when you wear tefillin, there are these little boxes you place on your head. There's like a box you place, and on the box there's a letter shin, and this little tuft of hair is actually a shin on its side. He's actually wearing, so his hair is kind of a prayer shawl, and that little tuft of hair is what's called totafot, also spelled with a tet. He's wearing totafot. He's wearing tefillin. So it's another ritual object kind of disguised. Here's another example. In Temperance has these 2 cups. Let's see. And in Judaism, there's a ritual called Netilat Yadayim. So Netilat Yadayim basically means purification of the hands. And several times a day, you're supposed to purify your hands. You're supposed to purify your hands, which purifying means wash. You're supposed to wash your hands when you wake up. You're supposed to wash your hands before prayer. You're supposed to wash your hands before each meal. You're supposed to wash your hands before you use the facilities. You're supposed to wash your hands after you use the facilities. So Netilat Yadayim used to be like a very integral part of Judaism. Netilat Yadayim is spelled with a nun, which is the 14th day of the Hebrew alphabet. And Netilat Yadayim, basically a vessel, it has 2 handles. Actually, where is my Netilat? One second. I don't know where Netilat is. Oh, so it has two handles where you wash one hand. The reason it has 2 is you pick it up, you wash this hand, and you don't want to put this hand on that handle because it'll get dirty. So you have a second hand. You have a second handle and you pour it. So they're showing the 2 motions of Netilat Yadayim as one composite image. And you can see, and you're supposed to pour the water into a vessel. You're not supposed to let it fall on the ground. You have to pour it into a vessel, and then you take that water and you throw it outside. So this whole figure is a disguised depiction of Netilat Yadayim. And interesting, so here in the Rader White-Smith deck, they put the Hebrew word for God here. So again, it's just weird to me that all this Judaica gets lost and then it comes back. You see this pattern over and over. But basically, if I walked basically there's, if I walk you through card after card after card, there's just like there's a lot of Judaic ritual objects hidden in these cards, and it's, for me, it's like, it's too much, it's too systematic, it's too consistent, it's too comprehensive. So you're faced with a choice. You can either, if someone sees one or two of these, they'll say, oh, that's a coincidence, but at this point, when you see this many objects,
the preponderance of evidence, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so you're like, so I tell people, either there's two explanations. One is that this is magic, that these cards all on their own, these cards through sheer coincidence created a depiction of Judaism, of Torah stories and Judaic ritual objects and Jewish holidays, which truly makes this a supernatural magic, like a truly a divine object, right? It's like the Torah itself rumbled out of the ground and recreated itself. I prefer the more mundane explanation that there was an artist who made this, and that this was an intentional work of art, and I think we're at this interesting moment where I think there's a lot of tarot people who think that I'm making all this shit up, that this is not really Judaism. And I think there are a lot of Jewish people who think there must be a tarot scholar with a better explanation. And these two groups are like, they're waiting for the other side to shoot first. And so I'm one of the very few people who know the Judaism very well and the tarot history well. And there's a lot of people who know tarot history much better than me. And there's a lot of people who know Judaism and Torah much better than me. But I'm for better or for worse, right now at this moment in time, I'm the world's expert on the intersection of those two, that tiny piece of symbolic property. And for me, this cannot be chance. There's too much here. But then, as I admitted before, once you get past this one realization, then it gets very speculative very, very quickly.
Yeah, well, is this your first time talking about this on a podcast?
No, I've done a few. There's a few videos of me talking about it. I think this is my first podcast. I think my conversation has really largely been within the Jewish community.
Oh wow, wow!
I think this is my first meaningful podcast with someone outside of the Jewish world.
Yeah, well, you got to go through the Christian clergy at some point, let alone the occultists, right? Let alone us Golden Dawn folk. Speaking of the Golden Dawn, so in the Golden Dawn, the Hermit card connects with Tiferet, and Tiferet, of course, is 6 in the hexagram. Therefore, the hexagram in the Hermit's lamp leading to or from Tiferet.
Oh, so it's a hexagram? It's not.
That's just 6-pointed star.
Of David?
It's a Star of David, yeah. But 6 points for the 6 of Tiferet.
Right, yeah, and
that would be the reason. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fascinating.
I mean, I have more. I mean, did you want to see more? Or
yeah. Let's go.
All right.
Rock and roll.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't wait for the huge book you're gonna have to write on this, and
I'll tell. So I had a very tragic meeting. I guess about a year ago, there was a publisher who said, "Yeah, we love your research. We want to do this." I shall tell you I'll say the name of the publisher. It was U.S. Games.
Oh, I've done business with them back when I worked for a game company in the 15 years ago.
Right. I mean, they're like the giants in the industry of tarot publishing, and we were pursuing doing a project, and we met, and they said to me, they said, we think your research is brilliant. We think this is really interesting. They think you may even be true. They may even be true. I mean, people. People outside of the Jewish world don't know whether or not I'm just making stuff up. So I totally respect their skepticism and their hesitancy. I mean, I tell people, it's, I have no evidence for this. I used to tell people there's, it is possible that I'm a well-intended guy who's suffering from an overactive imagination. It's very possible. I think I've gotten past. I think at this point I have a degree of confidence, but we'll see. But they said ultimately they didn't want to publish the book, and the reason they didn't want to publish the book is They said we're not going to make money. There's like people. They're like let's be honest. Our number one bestseller right now is the cat tarot. That's what people want to buy. And they said this is very heavy. This is very dark. This is very sectarian. They saw it as, they didn't say it's very Jewish, but they were saying this is going to appeal to a tiny niche audience. The general tarot community is either not going to like it, or they're just going to be bored by it, or they're just going to ignore it. So they're like, we're not the right people for you. That's what they said. And
well, at least they didn't say too much penis.
Actually, no. Well, that's interesting. They did say that. They did say that. They actually did say too much. Some of them were like, this talk of circumcisions and foreskin and penises, and what one of the guys said, why can't we let's just tidy up the penis? Can we get rid of the penis? And I was like, no, you can't get rid of the penis. The penis is really important.
This card is about how you tidy up the penis.
No, I've got a lot of. I mean, that's a very
put on a label. Do not try at home.
Professionals only, right? So So this is a sore topic for me. So there are artists today who make reproductions of the Jean Nouble Tarot de Marseille, and they fix the Nouble penis. They change the penis into a wand, because they say and I've reached out, and they say the reason we fix it to, they say obviously this was a printing mistake. Obviously the every magician is always holding a wand. Obviously the printing block broke at that location, and it was really meant to be a wand. And so we're restoring it, we're correcting it. And of course that makes me furious, right? For me, that's like, you're like putting graffiti on the Mona Lisa. It's like, it's such a, you're violating the sanctity of this holy relic. So that's a funny pet peeve of mine. All right, so this is the Tower card. So this became the Tower, but in the tradition of the Tower de Marseille, it's I'm going to mispronounce it, Les Maisons Dieu, which literally means the house of God. Literally means the house of God, and in Hebrew, the house of God is Beit El. A lot of people have said Beit El in their lives. They don't realize it when they say Bethel, like Bethel Hospital or Bethel Synagogue. Bethel means Beit El, which means the house of God. In Paris,
the Maison Dieu is very different from the lightning struck tower, the fallen tower, as they're often called in some decks.
Right. It's very, so I imagine the house of God is very biblical, whereas the tower is far more it's far more universal. But also you think more of the
Tower of Babel.
Tower of Babel or Babel, as opposed to that it's interesting to me. It's interesting to me how few people have actually read the Bible. Like it's kind of it's fascinating to me. Like if you actually read the Bible, if you really sat down and read the Bible, you would know that the house of God is a reoccurring object of great importance. And so the house of God was the name of the temple in Jerusalem that was built by Solomon. It was destroyed by the Babylonians, then it was destroyed again by the Romans, so it was destroyed twice. And in Judaism, there's a major holiday every year called Tisha B'Av, which is the annual day of mourning for the destruction of the temples. And so Tisha B'Av, Tisha literally means ninth. Av is the name of a month. It's the 11th month of the year. First of all, if you see in the sky, there are 9 golden flames, and there are 11 spots in the sky. So it's the 9th of the 11th.
Can I see? So this is the kind of thing that would just go, go right past a lot of occultists like me, because when we count these for things to look for messages, we don't have the same Jewish lexicon that you have for number symbolism. We're looking for different numbers, and so we would see this. A Christian occultist or a Western non-Jewish occultist would see this and be like, oh, it's 11 and 9. If only it were 10 and 12, then there might be something there.
Right.
But
right.
This is
exactly. It's like when you put this through a Judaic lens of understanding, it tells a very different story. So this is so Tisha B'Av is the ninth day of the 11th month again, and these are just like 3 graphics I stole from online. These are like these are like clip art graphics for about Tisha B'Av online, right? And it's, when any article on Tisha B'Av, it's going to have a picture of a tall building that's on fire. That's Tisha B'Av is the day in which you don't eat and you cry and you're really upset because you're remembering when the house of God was destroyed in Jerusalem. And what you find is that in this card, all these elements, there's so many out there. All this card is comprised of very specific quotes from the book of Ezekiel. So Ezekiel, famously, Ezekiel's actually one of the most important books of the Bible for the development of Kabbalah, because he had a vision of the coming destruction of Jerusalem. He also had a vision of the divine chariot. So he saw he saw 4 angels with 4 faces and 4 wings, and they were surrounded with these burning coals of fire. And so the Holy Blessed One began to describe to Ezekiel, he said, "Listen, I'm giving a judgment against Jerusalem. I'm coming to destroy the city." And he gives this very harrowing description of how parents will end up eating their children. A third of the nation he's going to kill. A third will starve to death. A third will be scattered like sand. And as he's describing this, he tells the angels to collect the burning coals and to scatter them all over the city. And he says, I'm going to remove the turban and lift off the crown. I'm going to make an utter ruin in the city. I'm going to cast them to the 4 corners. And you start, so all these elements, and I'll go through there's more. So all these elements are references to the book of Ezekiel. If you see these windows are in the shape of the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments were kept in the holiest of the holies, within the Ark of the Covenant, within Beit El, within the house of God. If you count this may be a coincidence, but if you count the thorns, there are 8 thorns in the crown. There are 30 globes in the air. The 2 temples stood for a total of 830 years. So there's always like little lessons of Torah.
I mean, if you were going to hide the Jewish story in tarot cards, then of course the next step is to make sure that the right people know that's what you've done by embedding these kinds of clues exactly like this. So it really is convincing, I must say. Like, I did not expect to be this convinced, though.
Oh yeah,
your Instagram is it was like, oh, sorry, I'll just let you continue because I love this.
Thank you. So there's another quote. So when Ezekiel I don't have the actual quote. So Ezekiel is brought in, and he's shown a hole in the temple wall. He's shown a hole in the temple wall, and he breaks through the hole, and he sees all the temple priests. They're praying to a foreign god off. They're not facing Jerusalem. They're facing a foreign god off in the east. And when Ezekiel tells him this prophecy, one of the priests falls down dead. So he announces that there's a coming judgment against Jerusalem from the wrath of God. And there's this, and it describes this one priest immediately falls down dead, and then Ezekiel throws himself on the ground. He starts begging for mercy. So there's like a depiction of this hole in the wall. There's the priest falling down. All right, so now we're going to get a little detail. So one of the things I try to convey to people is that this deck is a work of genius. It's like it's truly worthy of that word. And I'll give you an example of just how much thought is put into this card. So the 16th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Ayin. This is Ayin, and this figure is in the shape and form of the letter Ayin. Ayin is the 16th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. If you count the rows of bricks in the tower, you will find that the tower is broken at exactly the 16th layer. All right. Now, on Tisha B'Av, we read a book out loud called Eicha, which is Lamentations. Everyone gathers, and there's a very sad tune, and someone sings out the book of Eicha. And the book of Eicha describes kind of the collective mourning for the destruction of the temple. Now, Eicha is what's called a Hebrew acrostic, where every verse of Eicha begins with another letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So the first letter begins with Aleph, then it goes Bet, then it goes Gimel. However, the alphabet, the Hebrew Aleph Bet, is broken at the 16th letter in Eicha, where usually Ayin becomes before Pei, but in Eicha, Pei comes before Ayin. The Ayin drops. What, and if you notice, if you look here, the ayin is dropping, the ayin's falling. Why is that? So the people ask, why is the aleph bet broken in Eicha? Why is it broken? Ayin is a hominin. It actually also means eye. Ayin means eye. Pei also means mouth. And they say the second temple was destroyed because people spoke evil with their mouth before seeing the good with their eyes. So he's summarizing here the learning, the core moral lesson of Tisha B'Av is visually summarized here. So you could see, like, the way I'm teaching you right now, like, I believe this is the way people use this card. They would sit around and the rabbi would say, and the reason ayin is falling is because the people, they spoke evil with their mouths before seeing good with their eyes. They were using this as a tool for secret education. That's my theory. I mean, that's speculation. I don't know for sure, but it's like the level of detail in this card is magnificent. It's magnificent.
So many people like myself have been, I think, waiting for you for a long time, or at least let's, to be less messianic about your work and contributions here. We've at least, to say, been banging our heads against the wall saying something's missing, because, we've got these like 20-something occult influencers who are trying to cancel everyone who's Judeo-Christian and uses tarot because they belong solely to the Romani people. And my buddy put out a deck called the Gypsy Tarot, and they went after him because you can't say that word at all. And not to mention the fact that these are not allowed to be used by Christians and never were used by Christians, and certainly not by Jews. So there's this whole pop occultism brigade of kids doing all kinds of shenanigans, like they get people deplatformed off the internet, with their vitriolic mob stuff. So they're going to come after us for this, of course, but that's okay. They're idiots. But the rest of us, the adults in the community, have been saying there is a major disconnect between the emergence of these cards in the the Visconti deck and the Catholic wealthy elite having custom decks made, then into playing cards, and then all of a sudden, Victorian occultism. Essentially, there's a step missing, and this is just so persuasive. Like obviously I have to get this deck now and start using it, though, even though the symbolism is, again, I would need a book like the book that you need to publish to be able to really appreciate this. And of course I work with Hebrew as much as I have time for, and just getting to learn through this lens is really exciting. It's really, really exciting, because it's instructive of how the rest of us can, because there's nothing wrong with people putting out new tarot decks and new oracle cards and telling their own journey through whatever religion or neo-paganism they choose through visual images. That's a beautiful thing to do. Why not make as many as you want? And the fact that Christians did it or the Rosicrucians of the Golden Dawn did it with the Smith deck, and then other antecedent decks, preceding decks. This is the missing piece, I'd say, and it's instructive to the rest of us of not just validating the narrative and mystical occult symbolism buried within them, but as a tool for learning and teaching, whether it's through meditation and pathworking, or even didactic instruction, as you're pointing out, it might have been used here.
Right. I mean, one thing I'm very interested in. First of all, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm really enjoying it.
Delightful. Worth skipping the live stream from Dr. Sledge, the Sledgehammer, who will probably want to talk to you after he sees this, because he's Jewish and also has the Esoterica channel, which is, has 255,000 more subscribers than my little channel. Though my podcast is actually quite large, just I'm not big on YouTube. So this will still get thousands of listens.
I find the most precious gems are the rarest ones, right? So
you're a gem, brother.
We'll leave it at that. Popularity is another. That's another game. But I'm very interested in, because I'm not a fortune teller, or I guess or I'm not someone who really engages in divination. I'm actually brand new to that world, and I'm very and I've learned a lot. I've there's some things about the tarot or New Age world that I like. There's some things I don't like. What I really do like is I've really grown. I've grown a lot of appreciation. I never really grew awareness of this until from tarot. Is that I never really realized that there's kind of like a separate being who lives inside me who like fetches information, right? I don't and I think Socrates had a term for like a daemon, they would call it, or
Yeah.
daemon. Like there's this creature that fetches information for you. Like, and I never, and this creature is kind of like master of your imagination. And like when I meditate on these images, and I don't know why it served up what it did, but I have a lot of respect for tarot as a powerful tool for exploring parts of our psyche that are really neglected or ignored or just not spoken about. I really have a lot of respect for that, and I say that as someone who's kind of really very new to this. So I think there can be a real interesting conversation here between the world of Torah and Agadah and Midrash, and kind of partnering it with it as a tool for developing one's imagination or capacity for intuitive and creative thinking.
When you show me this deck as you have, it's not Egyptian symbolism and art that comes to mind. It's first signs, wall paintings of early cave dwellers and the first humans who were doing cave art. Like, this is what this reminds me of, actually, because the symbolism is, I don't know the right word is for it. That's what it reminds me of it.
For me, it's very primal. It's like you're removing some of the decorations, so it's becoming simpler, but somehow more vibrant in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So with the Egyptians, of course, you can tell they were expressing symbols developed out of a sophisticated form of thinking and interpretation. Yeah, but here it feels more like, the symbols are primal, and in some ways, even though you're pointing out all the symbolism perhaps buried within them, meant to be indicative of just our basic instincts, right? The fiery tower and the person falling, the dismembered limbs and in different cards. It's fascinating of hidden symbolism as you're showing through the Hebrew text, and all these esoteric knowledge that you would have to interpret the symbols, which is why someone like me would miss them, because I don't know the significance of these numbers of 11 and stuff like that. That's what. But the images just punch you in the gut. So it's like this combination, right, this 1-2 thing of like primal cave images mixed with actual embedded secret knowledge.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So
that's what I was trying to identify.
Right. So there are fortune teller. I've had a couple of fortune tellers, I guess, tarot readers who are like, I want to know the Jewish readings, and I tell them like, well, I'm happy to share with you. I don't know if that's going to make you a bad tarot card reader. It actually might destroy your ability to be a tarot card reader, right? Because